Okay, great. So now that all of us have a book in front of us, I'll call out your names one by one, and then I'll assign a page number to you, and then you have to read out a sentence for all of us, which will be your official introduction to the group. Okay, cool. So I'll start with Pratna, since she very specifically found a book with words, and I'm very, very thankful that she did. So Pratna, could you go to page number 31?
Okay.
Yeah, 31, and the second sentence.
The history of the DSM thus reflects the history of politics and socio-cultural dynamics.
It's intense.
Lovely. Amazing introduction.
Great to meet you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. If you could explain what that means now. Okay.
Next, I'd like to go to Prerna.
Oh no, I didn't open anything. I thought the rules didn't apply to me. Okay. Marjorie was a voluminous mound of sentient garbage and compost and leaves who had a cherry red cat eye, lodge net, and a banana peel fascinator set at a jaunty angle.
Rashi, what book do you have? Would you like to show us the book?
I picked up a Telugu, weekly.
You will also have to translate that for us. I hope you realize that.
That's one right there on the table. So I'm like, okay.
Could you go to page number 7 and read out the first sentence?
ఒకప్పుడు ఆ ప్రాంతంలో ఇంటికో ఫుట్బాలర్ ఉండేవాడు. At one point of time, there used to be each house, in the village used to have one footballer.
You happen to play football,
which have nothing to do with sports.
I was about to take a guess that it's about football, but then you translated and now we all know. Okay, so Deep, do you also have something in Telugu?
No, I have it in I can't read or speak Telugu. Right.
What is the book that you've chosen?
So I had this book by Hoshang Merchant, Revelations from the Queen's Closet, All My Masters. Yeah, I just had it lying down on the table.
Okay, cool. So could you go to page number 55 and read out the third sentence?
5 is empty.
That works. Deep.
So really it's empty. It's the beginning of some new chapters.
So I thought I could just give everybody like a sort of a context on what we're discussing today, and then just feel free to jump in, reject the ideas that I present, reaffirm it, however you'd like to process this information. But I just thought it would be nice to sort of talk about why this topic is important and why we wanted to sort of have a dialogue around this. So we have been doing this religion podcast series with the Unredacted. The Black Sheep and the Unredacted have been at it for a while, and we've been thinking about the question we've been asking is, how do young people see religion? What is their personal relationship with religion? Whether they are experimenting with it, exploring it, rejecting it, reaffirming it, wanting to reform it. What is it at stake? And it was just sort of a space where everybody, like a safe space where everybody could come together and talk about it in a more away from the media glare where everything is sort of spoken about in politics of it or the religion of it. We were sort of approaching it from a more personal, social point of view. So the third episode that we're doing with all of you is basically queer thinking, religion of faith. If that can even be a term, feel free to call me out on the term as well. It is just like a phrase for us to get started talking about it. There have been very interesting studies or research around this topic, which has sort of become like an academic genre in itself. One research, which is from the Pew Center research, which says that queer people are more likely to reject a religion or sort of be indifferent to it because it doesn't go with their worldview or what LGBTQI community affirms in general in the world, the way they approach a lot of things. There is another research, however, which contradicts this Pew-centered research data, which says that there is a thing called transformative accommodation, which queer people are more likely to sort of affirm religion because it liberates them, and they sort of queer religion in the process. And it's more like an assimilative process of spirituality and sexuality sort of coming together. And there is nothing black and white, and everything is sort of existing in a gray space. So we just wanted to get started. Anybody can go first in terms of your experiences, in terms of your personal journeys. How do you see religion, and would you think that we should affirm it or we should sort of reject it? What is your take on it?
Start. I think, like, personally, from my experience, and personally my thoughts are that one should not give too much importance to religion, especially dogmatic religion or religious practices, set practices. I think the problem arises when we start giving too much importance to religion and or rather religious dogma, if I may say, put it that way, and stop looking at human values or the core message of any religion. So once we start focusing too much on a set rules, certain set of rules, this has to be done, and only you can. Then you can be you can follow your religion in a certain way, or this behavior should not be done, especially concerning your sexuality or human behavior. I think that is where the problem arises. So as long as and I've seen people who are like extremely religious many times, what they tend to forget is that religion is also about serving humanity, human race, and not just about like following blindly any sort of practices that have been set by, like, in an era which no longer is the present era and will no longer justifies following those practices. So I think religion constantly needs to be reformed as well. So that's my view, and so many of the conflicts between religion and sexuality arises because we are trying to blindly follow without understanding the core messages. We are just trying to blindly follow practices, and maybe with time, many of those practices no longer probably are needed or should be reformed. So that's my personal view. Yeah.
In taking reformation, it would require us to actually delve into texts and reinterpret them, right? We've been seeing a lot of younger people who now interpret the old and ancient texts to be a lot more liberating than certain more conservative priests that uphold the text seem to interpret it as. So I think one question is, within your family practice itself, in your family practicing religion, is engaging with the religious text, engaging with the religion that your household has followed for so long. Is that something that's in your culture? How involved are you with your religion itself to either reject it or accept it or even try to reform it?
Okay. I'm born and brought up in a, privileged caste Hindu family, and I've explored and engaged with Hinduism as a religious practice faith for quite some time in my childhood and early teenage years, before moving on to exploring different other religious traditions. Per se, in my house, we did not. I mean, my parents were believers. Of course, they believed in God and offered some prayers, but they were really not that invested in religion as such, more than having certain amount of devotion and relying on the aspect of God and seeking that protection or whatever, right? Other than that, there was not much of a investment in faith and religion or in texts and scriptures as such. It was the other way around. I was quite invested in it, I think, growing up as a child. I mean, for me, mostly nothing else made sense, I think, anyway, around where we were. So I always would get into reading texts, interpreting them. So that way I often feel that faith as such is my first queer experience, even before my sexuality and gender in that way. And yeah, I mean, that engagement led to engaging with other religious traditions and exploring the possibilities of me being queer, and what does it mean in those certain religious practices and traditions. Where do I find myself, and what does it mean for me to practice or engage with them? That exploration continued, and as a Buddhist monastic today, well, in Buddhism, we don't have one single text, there are like zillion texts, and it makes it much more difficult to really, kind of pick one and do it. But more, the large amount of texts that talk about sexuality, gender as such, is the monastic code, the Vinaya, that supposedly dictates what monks and nuns can do, can't do, and all that. So there are many teachers today who kind of read them differently, I think, and also critique them, I think, because in Buddhism, one fortunate thing is that you can't use the logic or you can't use the foundation that a scripture says so. It doesn't matter what the scripture says if it is not, uh, if it can't be logically, reasonably engaged with, if it can't be investigated, analyzed, and arrive at a conclusion by oneself, it doesn't make sense. So that way, the critical engagement with texts is the core part of the religion that I practice at this point of time in my life. So that way, it's an everyday thing. You read the text, whatever the text that might be, and but also I think in terms of even before one engaging with texts or not engaging with texts, the view about religion as such, looking at it something, especially in theistic religions where God is the central figure, looking at them as if religion is given by God. I think it is something else the other way around. Religion is what humans have given to gods in whatever form they exist. I think it's not the other way around, I think. So yeah, I mean, that kind of shift in the view is necessary even before one gets into text, I think.
That's given us a lot to think about, actually. Thank you.
I also think that's very interesting, whatever you said, Tashi, because even in our earlier episodes, I think we've been looking at the concept of living text, text that you can make sense of in the light of modern times or whatever is happening now with how our values have changed over time. And I think we were discussing also how the Constitution also, not just religious text, but the Constitution is also a living document, which is what makes it, which is what makes the idea of progress inherent in it. But yeah, that was fascinating. Yeah, Pratna, I think I'll come to you now.
I especially love what Tashi said about their first queer experience being with faith, even before gender and sexuality. I think that really stuck with me. I think for me personally, it's very hard to find belief in a lot of social institutions that are already pre-existing. Things like religion, things like having like people to look up to, or having like a faith and belief system that already exists that you can just like subscribe to whenever you feel like you're in need of something like that. Because I feel like growing up as a queer individual, so much of your faith and belief in how the world is supposed to work and how you're told the world is going to work kind of crumbles away, because you yourself are a living example of something that a majority of society believes shouldn't exist, or just basically doesn't make any sense. So when you exist outside of any sort of a systematic way of thinking, I feel like it's very hard to subscribe to something like religion, which I believe is a systematic and societal way of thinking. It's just that you're a walking example of how these systematic ways of thinking are just a little too broad and a little too maybe somehow narrow-minded at the same time, and they don't actually subscribe to personal experiences, in my opinion, anymore. I don't think that my religion per se really looks into critical thinking of scriptures, or critical thinking of reevaluating certain traditions and certain thoughts that already exist and ideals that are considered very important. So I don't see how religion actually would fit into my life as a queer person, because I simply can't fake my belief in it, and I can't find any sort of realistic belief in it. And yeah, I do feel like it is a bit of an oxymoron for me to have both of those things coexist, because yeah, religions, a lot of them don't tend to move into modern thinking and a modern way of age. I mean, one of the biggest arguments that exists against queerness in this country is that it's against the cultural fabric of this country. And I'm sure that cultural fabric does dial into certain religious aspects as well. And when something like that is being used against you, I just don't see how I could subscribe faith and belief into such a way of thinking. So that's my opening remark on that.
So to those of you that have actually accepted religion as part of your queer experience, how has it been received by other members of say your religious community, and to be openly professing not only your sexuality but also your faith and belief in your religion?
So, well, because you see me in robes, obvious that I am part of a religious order in some sense. And I am opened out with the Buddhist communities that I'm part of, with rest of the Sangha and my teachers largely. It's interesting because, because it's supposedly a polite, nice, more liberal and rational religion, I think there is often not a very straightforward engagement with you, but there's always hushes that happens around, especially I think after the online COVID thing and everything has started, and some of us would have occasionally this Sangha gatherings online because we are all spread in different parts and all that. And my DP, in my DP of Zoom DP, that I am in a sari, and that kind of apparently triggered a lot of conversations among rest of my senior Sangha. And I mean, there are times when I try to address it. There are times when I just simply ignore it, I think, unless they brought it up to me and want to talk about it. But as such, in my whatever years of being a monastic and living with Buddhist communities, monastic communities, one that I've realized is that there is space for conversation, but there is also a certain amount of conservatism about, what, because how can I be of certain gender and a sexuality if I'm a monastic? That always becomes a bigger thing, I think. And also in terms, about whether sexuality, homosexuality or other kinds of non-heterosexuality or non-cisgenderness, is it accepted, or in Buddhism, within Buddhism, what does it mean scripturally speaking, or by in terms of teachers saying so or Buddha saying so? There is no consensus as such, and there are no larger, bigger conversations as such, because Buddhism is a patriarchal religion, as for all its liberalism and for all its progressiveness and rationality, and women are still trying to figure out their own position. Cisgender women are still trying to figure out their position within Buddhist faith across different traditions. I think for queer trans people, in that sense, there's a long way to go. But the only thing, at least the tradition that I am part of and the teachers that I engage with, I do see a lot of scope and possibility of engagement. I remember recently I met one of my teacher in Delhi while I was in a trip, and this teacher always encouraged me to go and study in a monastic university. And a monastic university is generally very gender segregated. A monastery is for monks and nunnery is for nuns, right? And so I always kind of dodged this encouragement, like saying, giving various reasons. And in this meeting also, the teacher brought it up, and I was saying, I can't go because there's so much of work in Hyderabad, and my parents are there. It's COVID. I need to be there around and all that. But he was like, "Oh, you can go after 2 years, then finish this work and all that." I'm like, "Okay, he's not going. Genla is not going to let it go." So eventually, had to, hey, Genla, you see, I mean, I'm not a cisgender person, and I find it very difficult to be in a gendered, institute to study or do anything in that sense. Mm-hmm. Then he immediately said, "Oh, Tashila, if you don't feel like at home, you should not do it." As simple as that. I mean, like, I wasn't expecting that response, to be honest, but right. And he was kind. And the response was very empathetic and trying to understand. He's a Tibetan, raised in India and all that, but a Tibetan native. So for him to understand it and be empathetic about it was quite surprising, pleasantly so. Yeah.
I'll share my experience though. So I went through like two phases, if I may say. The first phase during my early years, 20s, was where I thought one should outrightly reject religion or any engagement with religion. Like if you're queer, you don't need any approval from anyone, or you should But then I also realized that that's not how the world functions. Like it may, if I have to, because I was also like running a LGBTQ magazine, was involved in activism. So I also realized that while that may be my personal view, I've seen many people struggle due to the conflict between their sexuality and religious identity. And so I also realized that it's important to engage if you really want to help improve the lives and help people accept and make. So it's also important to engage with religion. And so and another thing that I figured out was that if you don't engage with religion, you basically leave out a vacuum, which usually what happens is you leave out that space for other more orthodox people to occupy. And so whatever space there might have been for you to engage or for people to feel accepted, you have basically given that out to orthodox people or to homophobic people. And so that space, and we've seen it in various other online spaces, probably. I haven't named the so-called social media spaces, where probably similar thoughts happened, and then those spaces are now occupied by really vitriolic people. So that is something also that I realized, and so I thought I should basically be engaging with at least my own religion, because in case of Sikh faith, at least, there's not much conversation or resources that are there that are present around sexuality or that explore this topic. And so over the internet, once I started looking up for resources, there were mostly discussions. Many times these discussions were led by straight people in a very negative way. And so I started to slowly engage with my religion per se. So I started writing articles where I expressed my thoughts on how I think religious text or the teachings of our religious gurus could basically be reinterpreted or used to reaffirm sexual identity and so that's how my journey began. I also started slowly expressing myself more, merging my religious and sexual identities in a way to make it more prominent. So I started wearing rainbow turbans to pride marches. That also got a lot of attention, both from media and people. But in none of these instances, I faced any kind of a backlash, not at least in front of, on my face. And probably maybe in some online communities I'm not aware of. But there was never any kind of backlash and kind of homophobic reaction, either in any of those pride marches or against any of my pictures that would circulate over social media as such. I've gone to gurudwaras wearing those rainbow turban. I've also recently made a documentary on LGBTQ6, basically 5 different LGBTQ6 sharing their experiences about being queer and Sikh. And in that as well, there's one person, Amolak, who's very androgynous and he nowadays basically is a non-binary person. And he goes to Gurdwara with all makeup and in a certain feminine getup. And he shared his experience, and he keeps posting pictures from when he's visiting Gurdwaras. And his own personal experience was he's never faced any homophobic reaction, not much. It's also because probably within the Sikh faith, Gurdwaras are more are an open space for anyone without any discrimination. This person was there also there in the documentary. So he shared his own experience, and even he said he's never faced any discrimination within Gurdwara or within the religious place, Sikh religious places. But that's not to mention that there is no backlash or there's no homophobic comments happening. There was this one incident I remember clearly. So I think it was a news of 377 being decriminalized or something. where BBC Punjabi had used my photo in one of their articles, and there were like a lot of negative comments within that article because it was using a thumbnail of my which was my picture with a rainbow turban. And so there were like so many negative reactions, people telling that they'll lodge an FIR, etc. That ultimately, I think BBC Punjabi took down that post and replaced the thumbnail image. But I've never faced personally. I've never faced any such issues. Also, if I may point out, it may be because I'm a cis person. If one is more like non-cis and gender non-conforming, they obviously, because in general Sikh society is very patriarchal, so the kind of backlash or comment that they receive is probably much worse. So yeah, those are my 2 cents.
I think that was quite interesting response, Deep. I was just wondering while you were speaking if Pratna has also had a similar experience with respect to your community. Pratna, do you think people are that forthcoming, or is the backlash more subtle, especially with the kind of caste and entrenched patriarchy that we have within Hinduism? Do you think the response would be similar, or what do you make sense of these comments?
So I think there is a lot of backlash within the religion, I'm sure, towards queerness and towards gender nonconformity a lot of the time. But personally, I think that a lot of the arguments and the negativity that I faced due to my sexuality didn't have a lot to do with the religious basis. I think for me, it is the lack of talking about it within the religion itself that seems to pose a problem because with certain religions you have a certain outright negative perception of these things that might even be written into religious texts, but with Hinduism it seems so completely absent that even picking up a conversation about it is very difficult because there doesn't seem to be any place where you can even start. Even if there's a negative place that you can start, it's a start to shift that negativity into maybe a little more open-mindedness, a little more positivity. In a religion where that space feels completely blank, like it's just non-existent, there's nothing there, you just don't know where to find your footing and even maybe talk about it in a religious aspect because it's so completely foreign, it's so utterly non-existent. Most religions tend to be very patriarchal, as we've been discussing, and I think that being a woman in a religion that's quite patriarchal already comes with its fair share of being put down because of the religion or certain expectations that are placed on you to be more conforming to your religion, and trying to reject all of that along with trying to come to terms with your sexuality is not very easy. And I do think that leaving having that blank space, having that lack of conversation just sort of makes that religion feel a little foreign. To me personally, it did, because it felt like there's no space here for me as a woman, because clearly all of these traditions, all of these ideas must have been come up with by men or with women that didn't really consider a woman's place in society as being much more than a homemaker, much more than someone who aids a man in what he does. A lot of religious texts in Hinduism do talk about duty and dharma and all of these things, but they're always spoken of as a man's duty, a man's dharma. There's no mention of women in the religion. So trying to find a place for yourself in that and trying to offer it importance, offer it respect for whatever wonderful positive impacts that it can have on your life is difficult, because you feel as though you're not wanted by that religion because they've made no space for you. So finding no space in that religion as a woman, it didn't leave me with a lot of hope to find space in it as a queer woman. So I do think that religious backlash is definitely one aspect that is very central to a lot of people's struggle with their sexuality. But I do feel in my very personal experiences, it's just been an entirely complete absence of any sort of connection with one's religion, because I don't believe that my religion made space for a lot of diverse backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. With the themes that we've been talking, whether in terms of religion has been made space for you and your queerness, or in the context of Sasha or Deep's experience where they've had to fight to make space for themselves within their religion, or has been not really overtly homophobic either. What do you think is the relevance of having a queer alliance within your religion? Is it important that we do seek to change religion or reform it in a way that is more inclusive, or is it okay if religion does stop being an influence in younger people's lives? As we see, the more modern, at least with Hinduism, the more modern it gets, the further away it strays from its text or from its core Vedic values. So I think my question here is that how important is it to create that space that supports and uplifts and empowers queerness within a religion?
I think I'll say like the ideal situation would be people don't give too much importance to religion, because a lot of the conflicts in modern society is because of religion. It's not just like conflict related to sexuality, but other conflicts as well that we see all around us is because of religion. So that could be an utopian world, but that's not possible. So coming back to like a real world, I think it's important, as I mentioned, to engage and create that space within the religion, because some of us might have come to a point where we feel obviously religion does not affect our lives. But I've seen like for many people, religion, because of the way that they've grown up, because of whatever reasons, religion plays a very important role in their life, and they find it very difficult to accept themselves if they think that their religious identity or religion does not accept them. And so it becomes important that we form these groups where we are able to help such individuals accept themselves, or help them to look at their own self or their own religion with a way, with a different lens, basically, which can be affirmative. Otherwise, like it becomes difficult. Many people go through mental stress and many different issues because of this conflict otherwise. And that, I think, is one of the primary reasons why I engage with religion.
I think that it would be very important actually to create spaces within religions for people from more diverse backgrounds, because I feel like having that center of faith and belief is extremely important. And I feel like I did read a study about in places like America, where people have moved away from religion perhaps faster than we're moving away from religion here in India. The center of faith and belief tends to be the place they work, or the brands they believe in, or the corporates that they dedicate their years of service to. And that feels like almost a scarier concept than dedicating your faith and belief to something that's still more wide and more embracing, like a religion. Here there are people who are directly in control of maybe the corporates and the brands and the sort of things that you're assigning your faith and belief to, which is a little scarier because they have a little more control over you. And corporates never tend to have the best intentions to begin with. Imagine having a workforce that dedicated to you. Like we can see instances of that in Japan as well. That tends to be like a more atheist country. Like these people dedicate their lives to companies which are even scarier than dedicating your life to religion, that can still be very rewarding. And I feel like, coming back to Hinduism, I just feel like there was a lot of space, maybe a little more space in more older interpretations of the religion for homosexuality to fit in. I think I have seen positive, or at least some sort of existence of, artwork and, temple engravings and mentions in certain books like the Kama Sutra, but something that, can resemble queerness, perhaps not outwardly spoken of as queerness, but can resemble it. But of course, our modern day interpretation of Hinduism has moved so far away from any sort of a reflection of what could have been there in the past. So I do feel like that leaves room to believe that, okay, religion can continue to change to be more open and embrace more people. And I do definitely hope that it goes that way, because this has been such a central aspect to humanity for so long. So clearly it does offer a lot to the society that, it comes into. So I do hope that we can continue to reiterate it in a more modern and accepting fashion.
One of the Tibetan Buddhist teacher, Dzongdzar Khyentse Rinpoche, says that the day before you achieve enlightenment, the last garbage to throw out in the trash is Buddhism. So I'm not sure if there could be a world without religion. Probably possible. Without Buddhism also. Why not? But we do currently live in a reality that where largely a religious society it is, or many religious societies they are, especially in India. As much as we have Section 377 read down, and there's a Trans Persons Protection of Rights Act 2019, all kinds of things, all kinds of judgments. I mean, we are not really a very law-abiding nation. We are not driven by law, constitution. However unfortunate that might be, that is the reality that we live in. We are largely driven by culture, tradition, which are again largely informed by religion in so many ways, right? And so whatever the laws say and don't say doesn't do much in the household of people, or in the neighborhoods of the streets and the communities and societies, I think. So that makes it significantly important that one has to engage with religion and religious authorities and figures, I think, because I think there might be, I mean, one should be able to choose freely whether to practice a religion or what religion they want to practice or don't want to practice, I think. Although that seems to be quite a dangerous task in the current day that we are living in this country. We are living in a time and era where if you are not Hindu, you are not Indian kind of, situation. So that is something we all need to be scared about, I think, and worried about deeply. But at the same time, how do, as queer people, for creating safe spaces for queer trans persons, how do we engage with religion and faith is an important thing as queer and trans communities, I think, for us, because we anyway tremendously lack safe spaces, affirming spaces, and religion seems to occupy so much of space. And just by the virtue of that, there is not any safe space because religion itself is not being safe in many ways. So how does one change it and engage with has to be individual, but as well as a community question, I think, that we all have to dwell in. And religion, I always think about Ambedkar, Baba Sahib taking up Buddhism in terms of that. I think, I mean, when I think about that, Baba Sahib, did not renounce religion completely. He eventually did take up some religion, whether it's Buddhism or not, that's a different story, but he did pick up a religion. I think that speaks a lot about what kind of role religion, in spite of creating all the conflicts that it creates, in spite of creating all the problems that it adds into the world through patriarchy, fundamentalism, all kinds of things. But I think religion, continues to offer also a kind of support system. Many religions do, I think. They build communities, they, give sense of belonging, they hold, people together. It's also that kind of purpose it serves, I think. And especially in marginalized communities, having such kind of support system can also be quite a crucial thing, I think, for many people, at least, if not everyone. So that also makes it important, I think, for us to engage with it. But of course, the engagement, I think queer people engaging with religion itself is interesting, I think, because the engagement is not going to be, at least the hope is that it is not going to be a subservient, subduing, surrendering kind of engagement, but rather a critical engagement that looks and actively perceives changing religious thinking, understanding, spaces as such. Because I believe, as much as for me personally, religion has offered a lot, especially my Buddhist practice and Buddhist teachings have offered me a lot and continue to. But I also believe as queer people, we have, and queerness itself has a lot to offer to the religion, to help religion and religious spaces and communities think critically about themselves, about their faith. Queerness does that, I think. Queerness has that potential, I believe. So that way, I think our engagement is crucial, not only for our sake, I think. Our engagement with religion and religious spaces is crucial for the religion itself, I think.
That was a very interesting point in terms of how queerness can influence religion in terms of its fluidity, and it's moving away from fundamentalism, which is something that religion badly needs. It's moving away from the binary and reading things with a lens of traditionalism and conservatism, and moving towards more fluidity and ambiguity, which is what queerness is all about. So that, thanks for that. That was an interesting lens to be able to view this conversation through. Think like last question, unless somebody else has anything to ask, is we've hearing gay marriage to be legalized. We've been hearing a lot of that conversation in the news. However, that's centered around Hinduism. The petitioners are Hindu. People that are challenging it are coming from a Hindu perspective. Barring that also, first, as queer people, is marriage something that you would go through with given your relationship with your religion? And secondly, if you do decide to go through with it, is it going to be according to Hindu customs or your own religious customs, which never even imagined it? I mean, it was never imagined for a queer wedding. So is that something that would entice you? That would
Well, of course, queer marriages and gay marriages are quite a big big deal at this point of time. I think there are cases lying. I mean, in all my critique of it and all that, I do understand the need of it. I think I do understand the urge why people are pulled towards it, right? Especially the COVID time. When you think about it, people who are partners staying for so long together, what if one partner dies, right? What follows that, because your relationship is not neither legally or socially or in any terms recognized. What happens to the relationships in the death of your partner, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of fear, of course, and also in the everydayness of life, not having a legal and social recognition of your relationship could be quite a task. And I do understand that sometimes it could also be unfair to ask queer people to take up the entire burden of challenging the whole patriarchy and marriage as an institution and all that. Some could do, some can't. I think we all have to also figure out how we, as queer people with different opinions that we have about it, need to figure out how do we have to engage with each other as empathetically as possible, I think. But at the same time, in the current context, I think looking at least, if queer people and gay people especially are asking for marriage, at least think about asking about it in terms of that works for all people of all religions, not mm-hmm. just of Hindu religion, right? And that is in some sense still it so many ways proves that how LGBT movement in this country still is driven in so many ways by upper caste, upper class, English speaking, privileged Hindu gay men, right? And that says a lot about what representation goes to courts, what representation goes to anywhere else, I think. But at the same time, just the other way, some of us friends were sitting and reading Law Like Love, which is a 2010 or 2011 publication, I think, in which Arvind Narayan writes about, in the introduction, first chapter of it, I think he writes about how the queerness is not about, or in general, the whoever the marginalized is not about wanting to get assimilated into the mainstream or the hierarchy. Like, for example, Ambedkar talks about annihilation of caste. It is not about fitting into the hierarchy of caste, or it is not about Dalits moving up in the hierarchy. It is about dismantling the hierarchy. Mm. So queer people need to also think about, do we want to, get into a system and find a place in the hierarchy and feel better ourselves, or do we need to dismantle the entire oppressive system itself, right? Yeah. That has to be the question, I think. Otherwise, marriage or not, like Supreet said, you live in a country and the society right now where you can't change your religion, where trans people are just beginning to get the citizenship in whatever screwed sense, right? So now to jump the bandwagon and say that marriage is the immediate thing is also not recognizing and identifying or acknowledging so many other struggles that are happening, which are far, far away from the marriage as such. right?
Yeah, I think Tashi put it beautifully. I'll just like to add a few points. So first is not a very. I think this whole focus on gay marriages or same-sex marriages is also in a certain way detrimental to the whole LGBTQ movement at times, because then it kind of tends to keep like the media, entire media focus tends to be like, once you have the right to marry, like hurrah, there's like every right that one can possibly enjoy, which is not the case. So this whole focus on same-sex marriages itself tends to be sometimes negatively affect the LGBTQ movement in terms of the actual issues that are present that need to be addressed. Also, personally speaking, as Tashi said, we should also be thinking about whether we need to fit into that model or we need to dismantle the entire hierarchy. Probably what is more important is some kind of a legal recognition for the LGBTQ rights, not and because there are cases like COVID has pointed out where without legal recognition of LGBTQ relations, things can become hard. But of course, that might be the my view or Tashi's view. I won't deny that from grassroots, a lot of individuals do feel that they want to get married in traditional sense. It's also because of the way we are conditioned again from our childhood. Not just queer people, but even for straight people, from our very childhood, we are made to feel that marriage is the ultimate like life goal, and one has to marry in a very grand way. I mean, for everyone, like from our very childhood, it's like वो घुट्टी पिलाई जाती है that marriage is the ultimate goal of life. That's the end goal of life, and one has to marry in a very Bollywood style and all things. So in a way, that becomes a dream not just for straight people, but also for many LGBTQ people who want to see themselves in a similar getup. And that is where that is the reason why many people, even from grassroots, not necessarily activists, but grassroots people, tend to want to get married because they want themselves to be in that situation, in that getup. They want to experience that custom. It need not necessarily be in a similar fashion, but they want to be in that getup because they have been from the very childhood. They have seen all around. We have seen movies around, which are all centered around this very idea of marriage and having that marriage ceremony, which is fun, which is where you get to dress up and everything. And we tend to have like, although this isn't true, but we tend to hear that marriage is like one life, a lifetime thing. Like you marry once in a lifetime, which I think the whole idea is absurd. I've seen many marriages fail and people getting remarried. But that is one of the reasons why also many people want to marry in the traditional way. When I say traditional way, so a Hindu person probably wanting to marry through their Saat Feras, a Christian person wanting to marry in a church, a Sikh person wanting to marry in a Gurdwara. And very recently, there have been two weddings outside of India, Sikh weddings where of gay couple where they have performed a traditional Sikh marriage around the Guru Granth Sahib. There have been obviously comments against those, and the SGPC has asked to ban such marriages. But I think even within the Sikh faith, slowly people are challenging that. And the reason why they want to get married in this sense is, as I mentioned, because we are from a very childhood brought up in a way where we tend to then ultimately look at marriage as a very like one of the life goals that one has to achieve. And we want straight or gay or queer, we want ourselves to experience that custom. So I think that is one of the reasons why people tend to want to get married.
I think adding on to this conversation, I completely like understand the arguments against making marriage a central fight in the LGBTQI's community struggle in this country. I feel like in some ways we're just trying to ape what other countries have done. So America got same-sex marriage, France got it, Europe got it. Oh, we wanted to. It's definitely the next big thing. But if we actually look at any other culture or society or country's fight for equal rights for the LGBTQIA community, it didn't happen in the same way that India is looking at making it happen now. And marriage wasn't the central fight that, like Sukhdeep was saying, so much media attention goes to. And that happened eventually. There was a lot of other struggles that they had to get through, and a lot of other laws and legal recognitions that were far more important. And I do think it is unnecessary to focus on same-sex marriage as being the ultimate goal, and to imagine that there's going to be any sort of societal reform if that legal reform comes in, because society is far from accepting any religion's iteration of same-sex marriage in our country. But I do think it's also nice to have the option to get married if you do want to, as much as it is a patriarchal institution that needs to be dismantled or questioned. I do think at the same time that queerness intrinsically sort of takes out a lot of the patriarchy and a lot of the, stereotypes and a lot of the orthodox thoughts that might make marriage harmful. Queerness sort of automatically erases that, because queerness, that's kind of the point of it. And I think that in that way, it is nice to have marriage as an option. And it's nice to, like Tashi was saying, to not put the burden of having to dismantle marriage entirely on the queer community. But I do think that the most important thing here is that we really look into, like, I think Prerna was asking about how would you stick to your religion's traditions in getting married if you did have to. I don't think it's really possible to do that, because a lot of, especially what I know of Hinduism's rituals when it comes to marriage, is literally like giving a woman away and changing a woman's entire identity when she gets married. So I do think that queerness would transform marriage so much that it would do a great deal of good for marriages that didn't happen, that even heterosexual people and cisgender people partook in, because it would be such an example of modernizing and sort of orthodox and ancient tradition. And I think that's basically what I have to say about the question that you asked.
Thank you so much for answering these questions.
It's lovely talking to you all and sharing these thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on this panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.